We are so delighted to bring you her celebration and being able to share with you the people who impacted her life. I have a little message for Claire. Dearest Claire, how do I love you? Let me count the ways. You were my mentor, my inspiration, my traveling companion, my best friend, and my cheerleader. Always worrying about me as I obtained media outlets. Today we acquired dance papers in the Hamptons, and she would say, "Are you sure you can handle this?" Always caring about my well-being. When my fiance died a week before my wedding and Josh had gone off to college, he said, "Come to the beach." And I did. She loved her beach home on Long Beach Island. And I cherish to this day the memory of us on bicycles going from one end of that island to the other. And as my company grew, I used her management style. She was my mentor. And I mimicked her philosophy of being firm, but friendly, but always expecting excellence. Through all the ups and downs of my life, she was there to reassure me and cheer me on. And I miss our daily calls, talking about nothing and everything. That's what friend is all about. How lucky am I to have had Claire in my life. And I'll cherish the memories of my good fortune to have walked this planet with the giant of our time.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very, very special tribute, a very special and virtual celebration of the life and legacy of the Honorable Claire Shulman, who served as the president of this great borough from 1986 to 2002. The program for tonight's celebration can be found online at queensbp.org/Claire, CLAIRE. Now, in a borough known for our trailblazers, many of whom you will hear from this evening, you have led a life of such devoted public service as robustly and as effectively as Claire Shulman. It was pretty legendary, and she blazed many trails. She punched through many glass ceilings, including but not limited to being the very first woman ever to serve as the borough president in the history of Queens. And Claire Shulman did not waste time. She lived every single minute fully and deliberately. Every interaction had a purpose, whether to move the needle or to move mountains. And most effectively, and perhaps most importantly, as any great leader does, Claire Shulman moved hearts. No one loved Queens more than Claire Shulman. And in turn, she was widely respected and deeply, deeply loved. She shepherded Queens for more than 16 years into the 21st century with grace, with humility, and an unrivaled determination to build a better, stronger borough for the families who call Queens home. I am deeply honored to co-host this very special tribute tonight with Victoria Schnetz, one of Claire Shulman's closest, dearest, and trusted longtime friends. This celebration tonight simply would not have been possible without Vicki and her team at Schnetz Communications and their tireless work over the past 2 weeks in preparation for tonight's tribute, and especially the technical steering tonight on this online platform in these very unusual times. Also, great thanks to Queens Public Television, and especially Rosalind Nieves for the key production elements of tonight's program. And of course, a hearty thanks to my team here at Queensborough Hall, including Carolina Gill, Aldo Grillo, Michael Scholl, Chris Barca, Anayeli Gomez-Bertain, and my Chief of Staff, Vicki Morales Casella. And of course, our deepest thanks to Alex Rosa, Claire Shulman's most loyal right hand for decades and the ultimate keeper of her extraordinary legacy.
Well, Sharon, it all starts with her children, who were there with her from the very first day they were born to the last breath she took, helping her to leave this earth painlessly and peacefully. And they're here to talk about their love of their mother, their sister, their grandmother. So I know that there's a tornado watch going on in Pennsylvania, but do we have Larry Shulman with us?
I think we do.
All right, you made it. Well,
Can you hear me okay?
loud and clear.
Good, good. Thank you very much, Borough President and Vicki. And I wanted to welcome everybody this evening and thank you all for coming and participating. I wish this could have been in person. I'm sure my mother would have loved to have it be in person. But we're so appreciative that you pulled us all together. On behalf of the family, myself and my wife, Linda Jacobs, and my children, David and Caroline's husband, Paul, and son, Colin, and my sister, Ellen, and her husband, Ken, and Meredith and Karen, we all welcome you tonight to spend these hours with us, remembering my mother. We were very fortunate to have my mother for so many years. For all those years, we basked in her love, which was an unconditional love. In good times and bad times, we relied on her sage advice, just like many of you colleagues did, but she was always there for us to point us in the right direction. And regardless of what was going on, she was always supportive. But there was another side to her, which I can remember from when I was a little kid in elementary school, which is that she had high standards. She expected a lot from all of us, but there was nobody that she expected more from than herself. And I think this really played out not only in her family and the love that she gave to all of us, but in her years as borough president and subsequently when she's continued to try to improve the life for people in Queens and elsewhere. I don't view her professionally as a politician. I think of her more as a public servant. That's what she was dedicated to. She was not all that interested in her own self-promotion or self-aggrandizement. She was interested in making the place a better place today than it was yesterday, and better tomorrow than it was today. And she never gave that up. And at the age of 94, as you'll hear later on, she was still working and trying to push redevelopment projects in Queens forward. It was that same ethos that carried her forward and taught us, all of us, and you'll hear from some of the family members in a few minutes, taught all of us to do the same thing, to try to leave the world a better place than it was before. That was our responsibility to our fellow men and women, and that we needed to take that seriously. Through that combination of love and advice and support and ethos, we couldn't have been more fortunate to have her as our mother and our guide through all these years, the 94 years that she lived, my 70 years, and so many of the rest of us have benefited from that. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to the next speakers. But again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for all the love and support you've given my mother and the family. We appreciate it beyond words. Thank you.
Do we have Ruth Wagner in the room?
Claire, how much I've loved you. You're my big sister. Have you ever seen her throw a spiral or swim the length of the pool and back, or dance the Lindy and laugh out loud, hug and mean it? How about tell stories about Mom and teach me to tie my shoes, to wear her good dress to a college prom. She took me and my 3 kids in when I was stranded and had no income. She traveled thousands of miles to ease a death, to see a wedding, to care for a sick sister, to share in joys and sorrows. She is with me forever in my heart and mind. Oh, Claire, why did you have to go? Thank you.
And now Stuart Wagner, her brother.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stu Wagner. I am Claire's brother. I was born in 1942. Claire was big sister to my sister Ruth, and of course myself. I was youngest in the family. Claire was 16 years my senior, Ruth 10. Although we were siblings, our interests were varied in different areas. I was involved with chemistry and had a career with 3M Company. Ruth was in fashion design and eventually became a lawyer. Claire began her career as a registered nurse. As a mom, she was a PTA member, then president of the PTA. But her true calling was becoming the borough president of Queens in 1986. Although she was always very busy with the rigors of her career, Claire always remembered her family. They came first. She was always there when I was in need. She ordered the transfusion that saved my life when I was 16 and suffered a burst appendix. She was there for my wife and I, driving my wife to the hospital when our first child was to be born, and I was in Vietnam. Claire always loved sharing her accomplishments, and I loved hearing about them. She was so proud of becoming borough president. I enjoyed listening to her describe the excitement she felt and some of the challenges she faced. There were always family events to share also. Like when Larry, her oldest son, became a noted oncologist in Boston. When her daughter, Ellen, became a doctor and then an astronaut. And when her youngest son, Kim, skilled in moving picture production, moved to the West Coast to follow his dream. She also took joy in hearing about the accomplishments of all of the children in the family, nephews, nieces, cousins, and of course, grandchildren. Finally, my big sister, Claire, was warm and loving with a great sense of humor, who cared deeply for us all and for so many others. She was generous to a fault. She will always be in the memories of those who knew her, and she will always be in my heart and mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. And now her beloved grandson, Dr. David Shulman, the next generation.
Good evening. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Sharon. I'm one of the grandchildren, and Meredith and I will speak on behalf of future generations this evening. My grandmother's impact on the borough of Queens, the people she worked with, and her extended family cannot be overstated. I believe her dedication to service, her moral compass, and her character made her the perfect role model. She profoundly shaped the type of person I've strove to become, and I think the same can be said for the other grandchildren. Yet somehow Claire had the energy and balance to be the most loving grandmother a boy could ask for. I'm lucky to have had her for 35 years, and the memories I have of our times together are truly countless. Even in her final weeks, the ferocity of her love was never lost. After she left the hospital in early August, we had a final trip down to our little beach house on Long Beach Island. This was also the weekend where I would typically ride in my yearly charity bike ride to raise money for pediatric cancer research. My grandmother was my greatest supporter. Per my normal ride tradition, I woke up around 4 a.m. on Saturday morning to get ready to set off with the sunrise. Claire was, of course, awake and wanting to know what I was doing up so early. Having just left the hospital and being away from her home in the middle of the night, she was a little disoriented, but asked me what time it was, and of course, whether or not I was hungry. In fact, I'm not sure I can ever think of an instance when we were together when she didn't try and feed me. She then asked if I could make her a sandwich and some coffee, and with a bite of sandwich and a sip of coffee, she sprang to life. I had her undivided attention, and she asked for updates on my research and whether I was seeing interesting cases in the hospital. It was a 4 a.m. breakfast I don't think I'll ever forget, but the interaction was not unique. My grandmother's love was truly boundless, and even with the countless number of people she felt connected to and responsible for, her attention and love never felt divided. On behalf of the grandchildren and now great-grandchildren, we miss her deeply and feel so lucky to have had her for so many years.
Thank you. Meredith?
Thank you all for being here. It's a huge honor to be able to speak about the impact my grandma has had on my life, as countless other people's lives as well. A true queen rules herself and serves others. That was my grandma, Queen of Queens, who served her family, friends, and city until she left this world a whole lot better than she found it at the impressive age of 94. Grandma was always there for me. She bought me my first guitar, supported me through college and grad school, and always booked time for us to have pedicures at Christie's when I visited. She was the first investor in my company, even though she had no idea what kombucha even was. She was a great source of tough love and was constantly nudging me to be my best in my singing, in my entrepreneurship, in Scrabble. She was my toughest opponent, and even in my choice in men. Grandma wanted all of her loved ones to be happy, no matter what path in life they chose. We all understood that our lives should be fulfilled and purposeful, following her example. Her biggest worries were never about herself, but always about her kids, her grandkids, and her friends. I took the road less traveled after college, and Grandma always wanted to make sure I felt her support and guidance, and that I was really genuinely happy. I'll never forget when I talked to her shortly before she passed, and I had the opportunity to tell her that for the first time in a while, I felt very much at peace with the direction of my life. "You mean that? All I want is for you to be happy, Mary," she said. I'm glad I got to tell her that so much of my happiness and success was thanks to her continued support and guidance. Grandma is the reason that I feel like I know I can do anything. She is the reason that I know big changes happen at local levels. And she's the reason I know that the heart has an unlimited capacity to help loved ones succeed. I'd love for us all to take a moment and close our eyes and think about a time that Grandma went above and beyond for you. For me, there are too many memories like this to count. I love you, Grandma. Queens, the world, and I am better off because of your reign.
Thank you, Meredith. She adored.
Thank you so much to Claire Shulman's beloved family. And thank you, of course, for sharing Claire Shulman with all of Queens and, of course, the entire world. Now we will hear from some of Claire Shulman's most honorable colleagues in New York. I will take a quick point of privilege. We had a few on the program online, you can see we had a few orders, but we've got some schedules to be respectful of. So first, I'd like to invite forward a trailblazer, another trailblazer, the New York State Attorney General. Theirs was a friendship bonded through talks over meals together, and Claire Shulman often spoke of the then citywide public advocate, seeing in her a bright future of great leadership, not my words, although I agree. And of course, joining us today live is, of course, New York State Attorney General Letitia James. Good evening, General James.
Good evening. So good evening, Borough President Sharon Lee, and to Vicki Schneps, and to the family and to the friends of our beloved Claire Shulman. My prayers are with all of you. Let me start by extending my deepest condolences to Claire's sister, Ruth, her daughter, Dr. Ellen Shulman Baker, her son, Dr. Lawrence Shulman, her 5 grandchildren, and her great-grandchild. Today, we are all members of the Shulman family. Throughout her remarkable career, Claire Shulman not only served as the political heartbeat of this great borough, she gave life to so many of its dreams, including my own. I will not limit her just to Queens. She reached into the borough of Brooklyn, and she supported me for citywide office, and in fact was quietly urging me to run for mayor of the city of New York. We met in a number of cafes, and she just continued to lift me up despite my own doubts. She may have been the first woman Queensborough president, but she also made sure that she was not the last. She supported women, she lifted women up quietly and privately, and she did it in such a loving manner. And she led the way in demonstrating how much stronger we are as a nation and as a city when we celebrate the rich diversity that is the life force of the borough of Queens and of the city of New York. And in such a time as this, when we find ourselves more divided than ever, when our nation is battling with so many pandemics, New Yorkers and all Americans can draw inspiration from the example of Claire Shulman, from her life, her love, and the fact that she welcomed so many. A woman who devoted her life to healing wounds of both the body and the soul. And certainly she was someone who I consulted with privately, and someone who led me and pushed me on, even when I wanted to just stay back. In this 100th anniversary year of women's suffrage, Claire Shulman will always be remembered as a trailblazer for women in politics, but she was so much more. Her passion for her community, her family, and her relentless spirit, and that laughter. Oh, that laugh. It was alive, and everything that she touched and every institution and project that she fought for, she lived life to its fullest. Queens is a better borough. New York City is a better borough. I'm a better woman and a better leader because of Claire Shulman. And America is a more perfect union because of her life and because she shared love with all of us. I will miss our times together. I will miss our dinners. I will miss her laugh. I will miss her spirit. I'm going to miss her love. May you rest in peace, Claire Shulman, and may God continue to be with your family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, James. Next, we have, of course, another trailblazer, Gregory Meeks, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, the chair of the Democratic Organization of Queens County, and someone who Claire was very, very, very fond of. Good evening, Congressman Meeks.
Thank you, Borough President Lee. Thank you, Vicki Snipes. And especially thank you to the family of Claire Shulman for sharing her with us. What an extraordinary woman. What an absolutely splendid human being. You know, Claire was the first person that we call the Queen of Queens. And it wasn't just because she was elected, it's because of how she ran this borough. She took over the borough of Queens when it was in a critically bad situation. It was divided. It was filled with political strife and people fighting politically and not knowing which direction we would go in. So it took an extraordinary human being to come into a seat that was full of conflict at a time in politics when it was full of corruption, to be quite frank with you, and calmed it down and said from being a PTA president, she's going to show that politics is not everything. It's being a decent human being on how to stir this borough to save the soul of the borough. That's Claire Shulman. So for 16 years, and that's why individuals continue to elect her our borough president, because she cared for it and she worked with it. And she made this borough, just as she's done, and as I listen to the family stories, part of her. We're thankful for her. She was not a politician, as someone indicated. She was a stateswoman. And the difference between a politician and a stateswoman, a politician would only think about the next election. That wasn't Claire Shulman. She always thought about the next generation. That's who she is, that's who she was, and that's why we love her dearly. Just 2 weeks before her passing, she was calling me, fighting for the next generation with some ideas and thoughts, and raving about Donovan Richards being the next borough president and the work that Sharon Lee was doing. So I just want to say to the family again, thank you. And I thank God for the life, the times, the work, and the friendship of Claire Shulman. I'm lucky to have been able to call her my friend, and she will be missed deeply and dearly. May God bless her soul, and may she rest in peace.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. You know, when Secretary Hillary Clinton was campaigning for the U.S. Senate, trailblazing Claire Shulman took Hillary all around Queens County. And Claire Shulman was also an early supporter of Bill Clinton in his very first presidential run while she was borough president. And although they are unable to join us tonight, I've been asked to share the following message from Secretary Clinton. Dear friends, it is with a heavy heart that I extend my greetings to all those tuning in today to join in commemorating our friend Claire Shulman. As we come together virtually to mourn her passing and celebrate her remarkable life and legacy, I am grateful for the opportunity to share my good wishes. I will always be thankful for Claire's cheerful support and friendship. When I first ran for office in 2000, Claire was right there by my side, boosting my campaign for the US Senate and helping us cross the finish line to victory. And in the years since, she remained a stalwart supporter. And of course, from her days as a nurse to her years in public office, Claire never stopped devoting her time and energy to our beloved Queens and to making a positive difference in people's lives. An historic trailblazer in her own right, Claire's tenacious example of service will long endure as her legacy. Today, I send my condolences to Claire's family and friends and to all those whose lives she touched. And while we cannot be together in person, let us join together in spirit and always remember and cherish the life of our friend. With best wishes and warm regards, I am sincerely yours, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Claire Shulman's tenure also overlapped with that of the late Mario Cuomo, the former governor of New York. And she was dear friends with the governor and Matilda Cuomo, with whom I understand she just had lunch several weeks ago. And although the Cuomos were unable to join us tonight, I have been asked to share the following message, and it's the last message that I will read tonight, from the current New York State Governor, Andrew Cuomo. Dear friends, I'm honored to join with families, with friends and family, in remembering the life and legacy of Claire Shulman, a beloved icon of Queens, and a true pioneer, friend, and inspiration to us all. My family and I were proud to call Claire a friend, and I know I speak for many others in saying that I always admired her toughness, vision, and determination. And through her trailblazing leadership and many invaluable, lasting contributions to Queens and everyone around her, she has left behind a tremendous legacy that will live on and continue to inspire us all. On behalf of my family and all New Yorkers, I extend my deepest condolences to Claire's family and the many whose lives she touched throughout her long, remarkable life. May we all find some comfort in remembering her and the important legacy she leaves behind. We also have a letter from the Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hochul, which we will share with the family in short order. Up next, we have greetings from the New York State Comptroller, Thomas DiNapoli.
Israel, which was a wonderful experience. And over the many years since then, had the chance to get to know Claire better, be a colleague of hers in government. I extend my condolences to the family and friends of Claire Shulman, a beloved figure in New York City and New York State politics. I think the first time I met Claire was back in 1987. We were on a trip together to Israel, which was a wonderful experience. And over the many years since then, had the chance to get to know Claire better, be a colleague of hers in government. Certainly the impact she had on Queens County is incredible. Her role as borough president, first woman to be in that position and taking over the job at a time of great challenge and having to restore integrity to the office. But that was Claire Shulman, a person of strength, a person of integrity, a person who got things done, whether it was on fighting for the school children or for the environment or for the cultural institutions in Queens. So much of what makes Queens wonderful today, the seeds for that was planted during Claire Shulman's tenure as borough president. On a personal level, I was always very appreciative that when I ran into Claire after I became state controller, she would always put in a friendly word, a bit of good advice, and always a positive thought about something I've been doing. She told me she was following my career and always gave me great encouragement, helped to build my confidence up, especially in the beginning of my assuming the office. So I think Claire is certainly someone who we will all remember. We will all look to her as a role model of what public service should be all about. Claire Shulman was a blessing to the people of Queens and to all of us who had the privilege to know her and to work with her. She will be missed, but Claire Shulman will never be forgotten.
Thank you, Hello DiNapoli. Up next, we have joining us for tonight is another trailblazer, Grace Meng, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, among many other things, many other hats, but also a personal friend of Claire Shulman, who was so thrilled when Grace Meng ran for Congress. And Claire Shulman would often say about Grace Meng, she would say, wherever she wants to go, she has a future that is limitless. Good evening, Congressman.
Thank you to our Borough President, Sharon Lee, and to Vicki Schneps, who Claire adored and respected, for putting together this memorial so that we could all come together and remember and celebrate Claire's life. And thank you to all Claire's family members for sharing her with our borough and our city for so many years. Claire is someone who believed in me before I believed in myself. I will always treasure her advice, from creative legislative ideas to building leadership skills and to even reminders to putting on lipstick and makeup. She raised the standards for all of us, elected officials, community leaders, young people, and the entire borough of Queens itself. In building a pipeline of community and political leaders for Queens, she believed in all of us before we believed in ourselves. Claire also believed strongly in empowering women and pushing for more women in leadership positions in politics and beyond. And she did this before it was popular to do so. She didn't just believe that women could do as good of a job as men could. She thought that they could do even better. The last words that Claire said to me expressed gratitude for my work in Washington, and she told me how proud she was of me. And all of you who know Claire know that she didn't just say that to make me happy and flatter my ego. We knew what words like that meant, that she had more ideas coming up and more work for you in the near future. And she was just verbalizing an encouraging prelude to the work that she would expect from you in the weeks and months ahead. You know, the best gift that a person can leave is the confirmation that one has made the world a better place for other people. And there is no doubt that she gave us a better Queens and a better New York City. She put Queens on the map. She gave so much to Queens and she expected much in return. And I know that her legacy and her love lives on in all of us as we continue her work and love for the people of Queens and New York City. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressmember. Next, we have with us, joining us tonight, one of the Lions of Queens, the former Speaker of the New York City Council, Peter Vallone Sr. Claire Shulman absolutely loved Speaker Vallone. They were such close friends, and many of you may remember how they made work fun, including their roles as the leading lady and the leading man. I don't know if that's the right term, but leading lady and leading man, respectively, in the annual legislative review. I don't know if folks remember that. That yearly charity for the Queens Theater in the Park. It's like the inner circle of Queens, right? And they sure had an absolute blast. Good evening, Speaker Vallone.
Thank you so much, Madam Borough President. As Greg had mentioned, the turmoil at the time that Claire became from Assistant Borough President to Borough President, many of you may not know at that time, the charter gave the City Council the power to fill in any vacancies of unexpired terms of the Borough President. So despite all of the bad press and all of the bad publicity, no one knew Claire better than I did, and no one knew that she was far and wide the most qualified candidate ever to serve as Borough President, to serve as any elected official that I ever heard of. And at the time I said, not only for the past Borough Presidents, whoever they were, but for also the future Borough Presidents, I can't imagine anybody serving better or more honorably and more brilliant than Claire Shulman. But there's another side of Claire that you mentioned too, Madam Borough President, another side that you mentioned to her, that I had the great privilege of almost having a heart attack when it first occurred, because Claire and I practiced our roles as the leading actors and actresses at the time, Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman in a Never to Be Forgotten film. And we practiced every week for 3 months, because this was the first time that the elected officials of Queens County were going to put on a show for the Queens College. It was very important. The place was full, over 400 people, and we had memorized our speeches. We had little cheat sheets with us and everything else on the plates that we were sitting on. Supposedly this little dining room that Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman were talking about. Everything was perfect, and she was the first one to speak. I was very serious, expected to be called by Hollywood any minute, and she said, "You don't look like Humphrey Bogart, Peter." Just like that, out of the blue. So the audience cracked up considerably, and I was mortified up there because I'm supposed to say my lines, and I said, "Do you really think you look like Ingrid Bergman, Claire?" And that did it. And from that moment on, our show, which we never did more practicing for, we did everything ad lib, became the hit of the Queens College. And not only that, Broadway heard all about it, and they offered Claire a position, but they never offered me. So I resented that very, very much, that Claire was so much of a better actress than I could ever be as an actor. In any event, I wanted to share that moment with you because she had an incredible sense of humor. And we spent more time laughing because laughing is the secret to the joy of heaven. I really believe that. I believe heaven is the place, or whatever you want to call it, where it's sheer joy and laughter going on all the time. And I know that Claire is up there, certainly with the God that we all love, having a good time, as only she could have. So God bless you, Vicki, for making this possible. God bless the family for sharing the love you have with Claire and knowing that we had, similarly, a very great love for her. God bless you all.
Thank you, Speaker Vallone. Next, we also have joining with us today Leroy Comrie, someone whom Claire Shulman herself would always describe as a natural leader, kind, honest, humble, yet incredibly effective in delivering for the community. And during Claire Shulman's tenure, Leroy Comrie was Archie Spigner's chief of staff. Some of you may remember. And she saw the potential in every possible corner of the borough. And the three, Archie Spigner, Leroy Comrie, and Claire Shulman, worked together to reclaim surplus federal land to create the Roy Wilkins Park we enjoy today, among many, many other collaborative efforts. And so with us tonight, of course, New York State Senator Leroy Comrie. Good evening.
Thank you, Borough President Lee. Thank you, Vicki Schneps, for putting this together. I just want to express my deep condolences to the Shulman family, and thank you for allowing her to be in our service to the borough. It was actually heartening to me to hear that she was also such a pivotal figure within the family, and that she did not forget her family, and that she was always there for her family as well. It only speaks to her magnificence, her leadership, her integrity, and her desire to be there for everyone that she encountered. Claire set a high bar for all of us who met her, as other people said, right after the time of crisis when the borough was in trouble. She created an opportunity to set a high standard, and making sure that the things that she did would be unprecedented, because I have to tell you, I was a young person when I first met her coming into the office, and it was amazing to me to see such a woman that was so comfortable with her power, wielding it in a way to get things done, not to be divisive, not to put up with bureaucracy, not to, one of the best things I did early in my career was to go to a meeting at Borough Hall where Claire Shulman brought various people from levels of bureaucracy together because they were reticent about getting a project done that was dear to her heart. And to see them slay them and put them in their place to make sure that the project could get on track and get rid of all of the bureaucratic mumbo jumbo, to be polite on the screen, she was just masterful in her ability to bring people together, regardless of their difference on policy, regardless of their desire to be bureaucratic and not move forward. She had a unique way with her voice, with her determination and her research, and with Alec Roser at her side. I have to give Alec a plug. With Alec Roser at her side, with Karen Koslowitz at her side, with Melinda Katz at her side over time, with Jeff Audrey at her side over time. And, she had a great staff also. They were able to get many things done. I'm so proud of the opportunity that I had to meet with her and that I had to learn from her. She endorsed my first campaign because she saw that I came up from the school board environment as well. I was president of the school board. She saw that I was passionate about representing, even though I was an assistant to Archie Spigner at the time, and she gave me the battery in my back to move forward. And even within the last month, 6 weeks ago, she called me because she was lobbying for a development project that she thought I could be helpful with.
May God bless Claire Shulman's life. May your family, may her family and all of her family, personal and extended, continue to hold her in high esteem, because Claire Shulman deserves nothing less. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. It's a true privilege, and it was a true privilege to know Claire Shulman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Comrie. Next, we have with us this evening Toby Ann Stavisky, New York State Senator, and also a very, very close friend, personal friend of Claire Shulman's. They were trusted confidants and companions on the political circuits of dinners and holiday parties and such. And so, good evening, Senator Stavisky.
Good evening. Am I unmuted?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. First, thank you, Vicki and Sharon and the Shulman family. And you know, it's interesting listening to the number of women who said that Claire has been such an influence in their lives, because I'm one of them. I'm in the state Senate because of Claire. She asked me, she suggested to me that it would be a good idea a number of years ago for me to run for the state Senate. I was asked to talk about some of the projects that we worked on together, and two come to mind very quickly. One was the cleanup, the brownfield cleanup in the local development corporation area. And we went down to the New York State Secretary of State on quite a number of occasions to get that money allocated. And secondly, I think what Leroy was talking about was early May or middle of May. I had a phone call from Claire, as I often did, and she said to me, I have a great idea for affordable housing. It's state-owned property, and we really ought to think about it. So we put together a conference call with a number of our colleagues. Unfortunately, that location was not feasible, but a week later, I received another phone call from Claire and said, she said, get a pencil and paper together. I've got a list of 4 more properties for affordable housing. I have that list with me. I intend to pass it along to the LDC folks because Claire, as Larry said at the beginning, didn't stop working. At 94, she was still interested in helping people, in doing good things. I used to tell her that her middle name should have been Shovel in the Ground Shulman, because she was so active, even at the age of 94, thinking of ways to make Queens and our community a better place. So I thank you again for putting this together, and I've enjoyed listening to what the other speakers had to say. And yes, Peter Vallone, I remember that because they got me to sing also. Fortunately, I was not invited back, but thank you.
Thank you, Senator Stavisky. Up next, we have with us New York City Councilmember Karen Koslowitz, and as you've heard earlier, Karen Koslowitz, Claire Shulman, and Toby Stavisky were very close friends, discussing politics over meals and in a field historically dominated by men for decades. These 3 women leaders leaned on one another, had each other's backs, and raised each other up. Good evening, Councilmember Koslowitz.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Vicki Schneps. Claire put the light on Queens. She turned on the light. Coming from a very dark place, Claire right away took over and made Queens a great place. Now, as we are having the remote tennis, I remember sitting at the conference table at Borough Hall with Claire and David Dinkins and many of my colleagues discussing the tennis stadium that was coming to Flushing Meadow, Corona Park. And I remember Claire demanding what Queens would get out of having the tennis in Flushing Meadow, Corona Park. And she got what she wanted. And Claire always got what she wanted because Claire wouldn't stop hounding people for any project that she had wanted. I had the privilege of working with Claire as a colleague and also as a friend. And I enjoyed the dinners and the lunches that we went to. I remember that Borough Hall, the people that work for Claire, we still have the lunches. Before the pandemic, we would meet in Bayside and have lunch and talk about old times. And even though I was not at Borough Hall at that time when a lot of them worked there, I still knew a lot of them when I came to Borough Hall as the deputy borough president. And Claire would always say, when are we going to have lunch? When are we going to have lunch? Claire will always be remembered when you ride around Queens and you look at different things that have happened, Long Island City, the Rockaways, all over, you see Claire Shulman's face. So I am personally going to miss Claire very, very much, not to be able to talk to her, not to get advice from her. And again, thank you, Sharon, thank you, Vicki, and thanks to the Shulman family.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we have with us another New York City Council member, Barry Grodenchik. And before the City Council and before he served as Deputy Borough President and before he served in the New York State Assembly, Barry Grodenchik first served as Claire Shulman's Chief Administrative Officer at Queensborough Hall. Claire Shulman called him one of the Queensborough Hall kids and had a personal love for him. Good evening, Councilman.
Thank you, Borough President, and thank you for doing this, and thank you. I never called Vicki Schneps Victoria, but I'll call her Victoria now. Thank you, Victoria, as well. This was truly a great lady, and I came to Borough Hall in '91, and I was recruited by Claire, and I found a new family there, Claire and Deputy Borough President Peter Magnani and Chief of Staff Alex Rosa, the Council Nick Garifas, and you're going to hear from all of them later, along with Dan Andrews and some others. But soon after I got there, maybe a week or two, we were talking just outside of her office, and she made a point to say to me, she said, "Barry, we can't help everybody, but we have to try." And that was Claire Shulman. She understood that government existed to help people, starting with one person or one family. And tonight I'm going to speak about a little bit about the great co-op and condo crisis of the late 80s and early 90s. And you can look forever in the New York City Charter, and there is nothing in that charter that says the Borough President of Queens may or shall assist in working out difficulties of cooperatives or condominiums. It's not in there, but like so many other things, Claire just invented a way. And the truth of the matter is that there were 20,000 families, probably around 50,000 people, who didn't become homeless, who didn't lose all their equity and in many cases their life savings, because Claire Shulman found a way. And in one particularly difficult negotiation, along with Peter Vallone Sr., a large bank threatened to walk out, and Claire looked at them and she said, "You're right, I can't help, I can't keep you here. I have no authority to do so, but tomorrow morning, if you leave tomorrow morning, Peter Vallone Sr. and I are going to be on Wall Street telling everybody how you are throwing 700 American families into the street, mostly seniors." They sat back down and ate $18 million. $18 million. This was just one example of the greatness of this incredible woman. We've heard from her family tonight, and I want to say before I end my remarks, as I said at her funeral, her family was everything to her. As much as she loved the people of Queens and New York City, her family was indeed everything to her, and she was so incredibly proud. And I have taken the lessons that she has taught me, and one of the most important, every day when she left, no matter how tough a day had been, no matter how good a day had been, she always said thank you to me and the rest of the staff. And if she forgot because something was on her mind, she would come back up the hallway and say thank you. And so, Claire, tonight we say thank you to you. I thank you for all the personal privileges that you extended to me, how you worried about me. I'm sorry you never got to see my beard because I couldn't visit you because of COVID. And I will tell you this, when Claire Shulman called you on the phone, to her very last phone call to me, I was always nervous because I figured there was something that needed to be done and I was going to be the one to do it. Claire, we love you. We thank you. We miss you. And I'm looking forward to this wonderful tribute continuing, and especially hearing from the Borough Hall family that she loves so much. Thank you again, Borough President Lee, Vicki Schneps. God bless you, and God bless you, Claire.
Thank you, Councilman. Now we have with us another trailblazer of Queens, who was first brought to Queens Borough Hall by Claire Shulman to serve as Director of Community Boards after several terms in the New York State Assembly. Since then, she served in the New York City Council, chaired the Powerful Land Use Committee, was most recently the Queensborough President, and is now the very first woman DA of Queens County, and I might add only the third woman DA in the city of New York. Good evening, DA Katz.
Good evening, BP. How are you? This is a great program. I'm glad to have been watching it. I want to thank you, Borough President Lee, for taking really the helm of the Borough of Queens County. I know that Councilman Donovan Richards is also on this call. I feel very honored to be part of the Borough President family. Yes, I was the Borough President, and I got my biggest compliment, and it's funny because I called Claire Shulman when I saw it on Twitter. I got the biggest compliment, which was, can Melinda Katz actually out Claire Shulman? And I called Claire and I said, you know, I'm not sure who that's a bigger compliment to, but I'm going to say you because you're my Borough President. She was amazing. And, you know, I want to just repeat what Barry said. I know Dr. Shulman, Larry, is or was on this call with his family. I want to just give a shout out to Ellen. And, you know, I heard a lot about Kim as well when I worked for Claire. To the family, you're always part of the stories. You know, I got to say, it was so funny when Claire was meeting with people, you know, she would be like, you know, my daughter is an astronaut. And then she'd say, and my son's a doctor. And then she would tell personal stories about the family and everything they were going through. And I feel as if I got to know the family so well. And I want to thank them for lending the Borough of Queens County their mom and their grandmother for as long as they did. It is not easy to be a political parent in this world. And Claire did it with such ease. You know, it was remarkable how much ease she did it with. And she knew how difficult it was, especially for women out there. And she taught me quite a bit about how to run a meeting, how to get what you needed for this borough when nobody really wanted to listen. When everything was going to Manhattan, she was able to get whatever funds she needed from the mayor of the city of New York. I remember her, one of her birthdays, Mayor Giuliani and she were doing a town hall meeting. And, you know, Mayor Giuliani brings in a birthday cake for Claire Shulman. And he said, make a wish. And she blew out the candles and she said, I want $9 million for my new pool in Astoria. And she got it. You know, but it's just one example of how she maneuvered in a world that really at the time was dominated by men. And, you know, at a time when it was unusual, she followed in great footsteps like Geraldine Ferraro and people before her. But she showed me a lot of things and she showed me the path in a lot of ways. And so I just wanted to get on this call and say thank you to the Borough President. She will always be, I love BP Lee and I love the job she's doing. Claire Shulman will always be my Borough President. She was a great mentor. She taught me so much, told me I could do anything. Never let the fact that people said Queens was second best get in her way, because in her mind, Queens was always first. You know, Manhattan was the outer borough. We allowed Manhattan to be part of us, according to BP Shulman. So I was excited to be part of her team. I come from that office like Assemblyman Jeffrey on Audrey and so many other people who have succeeded in the world. But she will be missed in the realm of politics. She will be missed as a friend. Vicki Schneps, thank you for also helping to pull everyone together. We miss a lot of the WOW girls. A lot of time has passed, but the WOW girls and the Borough President Shulman will forever be in our hearts. We thank you all for all that you've done. And Borough President Shulman never stopped being a mentor to me. God bless her. God bless her family. Thank you for sharing her with us.
Thank you, DA Katz. And before I bring on the final speaker among the honorable colleagues, I hear a lot about how Claire Shulman got what she wanted and knew how to get what she wanted. It was very, very difficult, near impossible to say no to Claire Shulman. And so one of the powers of the borough presidency, of course, is to issue addresses, right? We still have a topographical bureau, topo. And so we are working on, and I do fully intend before I leave, to issue a vanity address here at Queensborough Hall. It's kind of ironic because it would be an address in honor of someone who was probably the least vain person in politics, but a vanity address nonetheless. And before the end of this year, Queensborough Hall will also be 1 Claire Shulman Way, 12055 Queens Boulevard. So that will be done in the year 2020. And now we have, again, another trailblazer, New York City Councilmember Donovan Richards. Claire Shulman absolutely fell in love with Donovan Richards. She frequently expressed admiration for his integrity. She saw him as a bright man, as a good man. These are her words. Claire Shulman was very, very vocal in her belief in Donovan Richards as, again, her words, as the perfect person to continue bringing the borough forward. Good evening, Councilman.
Thank you. So emotional being on here. I didn't know I was going to get all emotional, but want to thank you, Borough President Sharon Lee, for the work that you've done. She was proud of you. I mean, we talked about you and the work that you've done during this period of COVID-19 and how you've kept the borough going and how you've helped so many corners of this borough, no matter what your race was, who you worshiped, where you lived, your geography. You have done a phenomenal job, and I just want to thank you and let you know that she admired the work that you did as well. We talked about you often. And to Melinda, who got off, thank you. I got some big hills to follow between behind all of these women who've led this borough probably for the last 40 years, at least it feels like. So I got big hills to fill. And to Vicki Schneps, who is such a good friend, who has done so much great work for not just Queens, but for the entire city. I always joke and say, do you own every newspaper in the city yet? But she has been such a voice during a time when we're seeing actually a decline in how our local papers are reaching local communities. She's continued to be a voice, and her papers have served as a true testament and voice for our community. So want to thank you, Vicki. Miss Claire's voice. I just got to say, I mean, Claire and I spoke probably every day. If we didn't talk, we text. And I could never comprehend or understand why how we fell in love with each other, technically. I remember sitting at her table and meeting for the first time, and her talking about, all of the things, giving me the history of Queens. And she sort of had followed a lot of the work that we've done in the Rockaways and in Southeast Queens. And I was just elated that she even knew anything I was doing. But, she was a person of her word. When I announced my candidacy, she rolled up there. I remember it was like 99 degrees outside that day, and she never left my side. Even through, races. It's a roller coaster, as you all know. It's a roller coaster going through a borough-wide race or any race, period. But she kept me going on a lot of days. She she got me more nervous than I needed to be on some days. Even when I was winning, I was nervous because Claire would be like, "Are you sure you're okay? You sure you're winning?" She was a tough cookie. But one of the things I most admire about her is she was an institution builder for Queens. When you look at all of the institutions that she's contributed to from every part of this borough, it is just it's a hard task to follow what she's done. But as I committed to her, while she was here and while she left us, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure we carry out her legacy and all the prior borough presidents as well that came after her as well, to ensure that we build this borough. Growth is good. We have to stand together. We're living in a turbulent time on policing and development and everything. And we got to figure a way to bring people together. So I know that's what she would have wanted to do. And lastly, I'll just say, get the shovel in the ground. That's what she always spoke about, getting the shovel in the ground. If we are not building institutions, if we are not building a better education system for our children, if we're not building affordable housing, if we're not building commercial development, if we're not growing our arts and culture, we have a serious problem in this borough. And we're going to continue to do that. And I miss her. I miss her voice. I love her. To the family who's on this line, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know I've sort of become an adopted family member to many of you. I love all of you. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Thank you, Sharon. God bless you all.
Thank you, Councilman. And now I'll hand it back over to Vicki Schneps to introduce Claire Shulman's most cherished friends.
Is Michelle there? Well, if Michelle is not there, let's go to Carol Conslato, the dearest friend she always said, in fact, she just said it when we had the big storm. She said, well, Carol saved my electricity. I didn't have lights out. Little did she know that Carol's not there, but Carol, you're there. Are you there now, Carol? I guess we're having a little technical problem there. So the next one we have waiting for to share some of her.
I'm good. I'm good.
Are you there? Go, Carol,
Yeah.
go.
Okay. I want to first thank you, Vicki, and Borough President Lee and Alex Rosa for working so hard on putting this together. And I want to offer my condolences to the Shulman family and to Claire's friends and the Borough of Queens, because we've lost such a icon and such a dear person. You know, when I think of how Claire touched my life, the first word that comes to mind is admiration. I met her when she was deputy borough president, and Claire really didn't need a particular title to generate her brand of magic. But I watched her, I learned from her, and I sought her advice, and we could talk about anything. Claire never judged me. In fact, she usually had a better story about whatever particular situation I was in. And we would laugh, and then she would give me more advice, and our friendship grew. We would strategize on challenges, catch up on family, share good books, and of course, gossip occasionally. And usually we would end up giggling about something. And I loved to giggle with Claire. She loved to have fun, and she had a mischievous side to her. I remember one time a friend had dressed up in a chicken costume to entertain a party. No one knew, but Claire hid his clothes, in the snow, I might add. So she eventually disclosed their whereabouts after we all laughed at the vision of him driving home in a chicken costume. But Claire's kindness and concern will always be so precious to me. Several years ago, I was with my mother when she passed away, and Claire called me moments later. It was that long distance hug that I needed from my dear friend that helped me move forward. And now it's time to move forward again. You know, A.A. Milne said it best: if there ever comes a day when we can't be together, keep me in your heart, and I'll stay there forever. Love you, Claire.
Thank you, Carol. How beautiful. And Audrey Pheffer, our Queens County Clerk. Are you there, Audrey?
Here I am.
Great.
Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity. And it's very difficult to express my feelings and the love I have for Claire Shulman in just 2 minutes, but I'm going to try. I met Claire in the mid-70s when she was in charge of the community boards. I was a community activist in the Rockaways, and our paths crossed. We really began working together when she sat on the Board of Estimates for Donald Manus. We developed a mutual respect for each other at times, and I was an aggressive, impatient activist, and Claire was always the voice of reason. I realized that was the beginning of our professional and personal relationship. To this day, I say that Claire was my hero. She was a role model that I looked up to and tried so hard to follow. Claire was the caretaker, the queen of queens, while attending to her family, her children, her grandchildren, her husband, her sister, her nieces, her brother, her nephews. I want to take a moment to talk about Claire as a friend and a mentor. She never hesitated to say how proud she was of my political accomplishments. She always asked and was so interested in my husband, Glenn, and of course my daughter, Stacy, the assemblywoman. She got such pleasure learning and watching her act. Claire taught me not to ever understate my accomplishments. Women never like to brag or acknowledge their feats. However, Claire made sure to tell you what she did during her reign. When we went to Queen's Theater, she would say, "I built that." It wasn't to stroke her ego. It was to let me know what women can accomplish if and when they put their minds to it and focus.
Up.
Right?
Thank
we
you.
had great dinners, the Wows, and Ruthie, we're going to miss you, and went to many gala affairs. Claire was funny, and the evenings were so enjoyable. Remember, unfortunately, she couldn't drink. She would have one drink with the ladies, and she would say, "I'm tipsy, and if I have another drink, I'll be dancing on the tables."
Audrey, time's up.
Okay, she was a dynamic person, and I want to say thank you, Claire. I'll always remember you for your guidance and friendship. Thank you.
Thank you. And now a guardian angel who watched over Claire in her last days, Sara Pecker, a good friend.
Vicki, thank you so much, and thank Alex and everybody who has allowed me to be a part of this evening. I had the good fortune to know Claire for almost 30 years, and during that time, I had 3 distinct relationships with her. The first was when I went to work with her at Borough Hall. For 9 years, I served as her Director of Traffic Safety, Tourism, and Cultural Affairs. I learned why Claire was considered a force to be reckoned with. She built hospitals, cultural institutions, infrastructure, and by assembling amazing teams, she changed the face of the borough. Our relationship transitioned when I left Borough Hall to work at another city agency. And during that time, Claire, my late husband, and I would go out to dinner on frequent occasions. Marvin and I took great joy in introducing Claire to new restaurants, and were always delighted when she enjoyed our choices, and particularly when she wanted to go back. But it was during the last several months when I was able to spend extensive one-on-one time with Claire, I got to know her more personal side. Our conversations spanned everything and anything, and they were fascinating. They revealed a side of Claire that I felt uniquely privileged to experience. I saw that whether on a professional or a personal level, what you saw with Claire was what you got.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off, but we've got to keep moving the program, Sara. Thank you.
Vicki, I'm back.
Okay, we'll go to Bob Bishop.
Would you like to let Michelle go first?
Doesn't matter. Go ahead, Bob.
Let Michelle speak. She's been waiting. She's supposed to talk first, okay?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Vicki, and thank you, Borough President. My friend Dahong and I met Claire in China in 1988. Ever since then, Claire was always there for me. She was my American mom and my daughter Wendy's grandma. She took me home when I first landed in the country in 1993. She sponsored my immigration to America and even proofread my PhD dissertation. She made recommendations for my first job in the city. She was the reason we ended up living on the same block for over a decade. Claire was at my bedside when Wendy was born. Weeks later, when my husband was outside of the country, it was Claire and Miao who rushed my sick newborn to the LIJC emergency room. Claire broke into the examining room when she heard the baby was crying nonstop. She yelled at the pediatric resident and demanded a pediatrician. That was Claire, always taking charge. Claire did everything possible for me, a girl she just happened to meet in China to pursue the American dream. She taught me how to treat everyone equally with respect and work with unwavering determination to help others.
Thank you. Time's up. I'm sorry. We got to move on to Bob. Thank you so much, Michelle. Bob?
Thank you very much. First, my condolences to the family. And Ruth, if you're still on, I'd like to particularly give you a shout out. We had so many good times talking about Montana and Points West. I got to know Claire, as many of you did, when she was sitting in on the Board of Estimate, but we skipped forward a few years. About 10 years ago, Mike Bloomberg asked Claire to help him pass some development proposals for Willets Point. And the Bloomberg administration set up a legal structure, a local development corporation for Claire, and then told her to go do her thing. And Claire was just amazing at it. Yet there were some technicalities that caused her to get a little bit of embarrassment. After she signed an agreement to not lobby, she brought me on as a special counsel to help her comply with the lobby laws. And and that little bit of work turned into a very strong friendship over the years. But it brings me to another point. In politics, you have great power. In government, we have great representative authority. But there is, so to speak, there is people that are on the light side, the good side, and there's people on the bad side. And you can just go to certain websites right now and see what people are saying about the great Claire Shulman, and you think that they must be talking about someone else. I'm not going to go into the negative. I want to dwell on the positive with Claire, and I leave you with one thought. When you have a moral decision, a governmental decision, just say, what would Claire have done?
Beautiful. Thank you, Bob. She adored you. Thank you. Scott Gallo, who she treasured. Scott and Maria, are you there? I know that Scott.
Hello?
There you are, Scott. Hey.
Okay. Vicki, I want to give you a special thanks because I don't know if you remember, but you're the one that introduced me to Claire.
Yes.
You know, I'm not a public speaker, but let me just offer my condolences to the family. You know, I saw Claire for the last 7 years, just about every single day. And the day after she died, I still went to the house and I just had to pull over because I started crying. I loved her very much. And you know what? She always treated everyone with respect, no matter who they were. And like I said, I was always there every day, half hour, an hour. And it seems like such a little time. But as little time as that is, it's left such a big hole in my heart. And 2 weeks later, and I still have a hard time believing it, because I thought she would have outlived me. my condolences to the family. I love you all. Bye.
So Scott didn't say this, but I have to tell you that he walked her dog every morning and she adored that dog, and Scott made it possible to her have the dog, and that outside her window, he filled the bird feeder, and those birds gave Claire great joy. So Scott, you really filled her life with pleasures that were not possible without you. Thank you, thank you. And now we'd like to go to Rabbi Yossi Wasowski of the Chabad of Northeast Queens. Are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear. 2 minutes.
It is a great honor for me to participate in this special event celebrating the life of the Honorable Claire Shulman. Thank you, Vicky. Claire was a dear friend, both to our organization, Chabad of Northeast Queens, and to our family. Most people we encounter in life share something in common, and that is self-orientation. The average person is focused on themselves, how to make life better for themselves, and how to ensure that they do well as individuals. Rarely do we encounter the outliers, the ones who are blessed with a unique soul, those who are transcendent, and that was Claire. She lived her life thinking not just about herself, but about others, how she could be of assistance to someone else. From her years taking care of polio patients, to her years on the school board, to her tenure leading our wonderful borough, Claire embodied and personified this ideal, and for that we are eternally grateful. Her last words to me in our final conversation a few weeks ago were, "Rabbi, please tell me how I can help you." King Solomon in Ecclesiastes teaches us, the living should take to heart. The greatest legacy Claire can leave is that each and every one of us pledge to live our lives in just a little bit like her, do our part to contribute to the greater good, something I know the Claire's children and grandchildren actualize. I would like to offer my condolences to the distinguished family and wish all on this forum as we approach the Jewish New Year, and Claire was such a proud Jew, that the Almighty bless us all and the entire world with a happy, healthy, and sweet New Year, and boy, do we need it. Thank
Amen.
you.
Amen. Thank you. And now we have the wonderful people that Claire worked with so beautifully, but there was a special moment in her life as borough president when it was the State of the Borough Address in January 2000. And we're going to show a video of what turned her tears on the stage. Let's go to the video.
These students, representing all of the children in Queens, would like to express in song their thanks to our godmother, Borough President Shulman.
It must have been cold there in my shadow to never have sunlight on your face. You've been content to let me shine. You always walked a step behind. I was the one with all the glory. You were the one. Well, you were the one with all the strength. I was the one. Only a face without a name. I never once heard you complain. Did you ever know that you're my
the other wind beneath her wings with the wonderful Borough Hall family. Alex Rosa, Chief of Staff. You were there for her for decades as her right hand and her left hand. Alex?
Claire Shulman, just the mention of her name, she was an icon, but I called her Ma. For more than 40 years, Claire was my mentor, my friend, my second mother. She saw me through some of the toughest times of my life. She was larger than life, but for me, she was always close at hand, giving her support and sharing laughter. When I first met Claire, I was only 23 years old. And frankly, I was a bit afraid of her. She was such a commanding presence and a powerful force to be reckoned with when women were not recognized for being powerful. As her chief of staff, I had a front row seat as she used her unique ability to be powerful and tough, to cajole, to be collaborative, all with the aim of getting people to say yes to projects that she wanted to get done for Queens. Over the years, I worked with Claire on city budget negotiations. These would often last for days on end and throughout the night. And sometimes some of the principals would leave their surrogates behind to carry their message until they returned. Not Claire. She never left. When people would ask her, how'd you manage that? She would simply smile and say, I'm a registered nurse. I used to do night duty. As a nurse, she said, you had to think on your feet. You had to know what you're doing because people's lives depended on it. And that's the philosophy she brought to Borough Hall. She had high expectations for herself and for everybody around her. And she appreciated the team that she had built. I want to say these words that she said about her staff. Every one of them knew what their job was. We worked together as a team and made decisions together. I had a staff that could really deliver, and I loved every one of them. On behalf of the Borough Hall family, Claire, we loved you right back.
Thank you, Alex. And here's a person that she loved, but we're going to keep Judge Nicholas Garifas to 2 minutes. Go, Nick, go.
My family and I have known Claire and her family since 1955, when we moved to Bayside. My brother Michael and I went to school with Larry and Ellen at PS 41. When Claire became borough president, she asked me to join her team as her counsel, and I assisted her for 9 years. I've been asked to talk about 3 things: tennis, courthouses, and garbage. Claire was a courageous force behind the expansion of the National Tennis Center in the early 1990s that resulted in the building of the Arthur Ashe Stadium. Last year, 850,000 fans attended the Open over 3 weeks. Claire realized that the borough's justice infrastructure needed enhancement. And together with the Chief Judge of the state and DA Brown, Claire built the Kew Gardens Criminal Court Annex, the first ever civil court building in the borough, and the much needed state-of-the-art family court building on Jamaica Avenue. Those were great accomplishments. Finally, Claire also used the judicial system creatively. In 1987, she directed me to secure an injunction to stop the infamous Town of Islip garbage barge from tying up at Newtown Creek Transfer Station. It had been turned away in North Carolina, Mexico, and Belize. Claire sued the city and the captain of the tugboat that was pulling it. She obtained a court restraining order on a Saturday morning, and she personally delivered the order to the Maspeth Sanitation Depot Saturday afternoon. A sanitation department launch delivered the order to the tugboat captain as the barge neared New York Harbor. Phil Donahue, the TV host, asked Claire to be interviewed standing on the garbage on the barge, but she declined, preferring the dignity of a TV studio appearance. After a hearing in court, the city agreed to have the refuse incinerated in Brooklyn. The ash was returned to Islip for burial. So in any event, we are all so proud of Claire's wonderful history at Borough Hall,
And we have learned as her staff that she was a great leader, and she taught us to put to good use what we learned from her. Thank you, Claire. God bless you and your memory.
Thank you. And David Nicenti, now with the Union Settlement and a former chief counsel. Dave, are you there?
I am here. Thank you so much, Vicki. First, of course, my condolences to the entire Shulman family. There's two people in Borough Hall when I was there that you had to listen to. One was Claire and one was Alex Rosa. Alex has asked me to talk about the topic that you've all been waiting for, which of course is terminal Doppler weather radar. You all know what that is because you watch Channel 4 and Channel 2 or Channel 7. They all have Doppler radars telling you where the storms are. At the time that I was in Borough Hall, two entities that did not have this radar were LaGuardia and Kennedy airports, which drove Claire crazy. So just as Barry said, there's nothing in the charter that says that borough presidents do anything about co-ops. There's nothing in the charter that says, or the United States Constitution that says that borough presidents do anything about Doppler radar. But she demanded, regardless of where her stature was, that the FAA put Doppler radar, two of them, one at Kennedy and one at LaGuardia. You see a picture of it there right now. The FAA, in its infinite wisdom, and they can explain it in great detail if you have a one-on-one conversation, decided to put one instead of two at Floyd Bennett Field, which broke every rule of their siting. So we put together this masterful report that explained why they couldn't be put there. And then, of course, it ended up at Floyd Bennett Field. The point, though, was that Claire knew no bounds as to where her jurisdiction was, and if it mattered for the people of Queens, she cared deeply about it. In order to save some time, I'm not going to tell you about the second. I have one more. One of the greatest things that Claire did was I was on the Board of Visitors for CUNY Law School, where I met Andrea Shapiro Davis, and we're together, and that made Claire very happy. And I want to do a shout out to Andrea and a shout out to Claire and the family for bringing us together.
Oh, she loved you both. She loved you both. And now Dan Andrews, the former press secretary. Dan, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much,
All right.
Vicki and Alex, and my condolences, of course, to the entire and greatly accomplished Shulman family. I had the honor and privilege of working for Claire as press secretary from 1990 until the end of 2001. It wasn't an easy job, but comparatively so, representing her to the press, because Claire was an elected official who restored integrity to government. She was a modern day Henry Clay, able to negotiate fairly and bring people together. As the anniversary of 9/11 approaches once again, I'm reminded of some of the Claire's finest moments as borough president. Her visit on that day to the firehouse on the hill in Maspeth, which had just experienced the loss of 17 members, and later the same day, her trip to Elmhurst Hospital, where she thanked the hundreds of people who had gathered to give blood for World Trade Center survivors. In the weeks and months that came to follow, she attended approximately 50 funerals for firefighters from Queens who had made the ultimate sacrifice. On those days, and indeed every day of her tenure, Claire displayed her character, her compassion, and her concern for the people she served.
Thank
Claire
you.
Shulman.
But I've got to the 2 minutes.
Last paragraph. Claire Shulman was seen as a kindly mother figure, ever the competent public servant, and ever the deeply committed nurse caring for all the people of Queens County.
Thank you, Dan. That was
Thank
so
you.
true.
Thank you.
And now I'm so delighted to bring on Roseanne Josh, who was the former Special Assistant for Education.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you to the Borough President
for bringing us together. I had the privilege of serving as Claire's Special Assistant for Education. And that was when she became borough president. Building schools was one of her main priorities. She was dealing with the bureaucratic maze, however. Every construction project was a challenge. Undaunted, Claire said her children deserve the best. Claire established the War Room. Everybody remember the War Room. With Deputy Borough President Peter Magnani at her side, Claire presided over monthly meetings where progress of the school construction was monitored. Seated around the table with school district superintendents, community board district managers, elected officials, school construction authority, architects and engineers, this team established the needs and found appropriate sites and allocated funding. And a matrix was created. The final result was a ribbon cutting. Monthly progress on each project was discussed. If there was a problem, Claire would very gently, Claire style, would find out why. By the following month, the log jam was cleared. During her tenure, thousands of seats were built and 25 additional additions were constructed. And among her lasting achievements were innovative and world-renowned schools. Claire worked with Tony Bennett to establish the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts in Astoria. In 2001, Claire joined Tony to cut the ribbon at the opening of the Frank Sinatra High School in a temporary location at LaGuardia Community College. This was the prelude to the opening of an extraordinary new facility in Astoria. Actually, Tony asked me to share his thoughts with you tonight. Quote, Susan and I were saddened to hear of Claire's passing. She was a powerful force in Queens and instrumental in realizing our dream of the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts in my hometown of Astoria. We couldn't have done it without you. Today, thousands of students throughout Queens benefit from Claire's drive, commitment, and vision. Thank you, Claire. We miss you. Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you, Roseanne. And now Paula Maselli. She is now with Services Now for Adult Persons, SNAP, and she was the former Director of Health and Human Services at Borough Hall.
Yes, good evening. Thank you so much, Vicki, and thank you for this opportunity. So I was one of the Borough Hall kids, one of Claire's kids that came up under Claire, couldn't have asked for a better mentor. And I had the privilege and honor of working on the Queens Hospital Center rebuilding project with Claire. That was one of the projects that were near and dear to her heart. It had a personal connection to her from her previous years as a nurse. And then as borough president, the commitment to make sure that all residents of Queens had quality health care available to them at all times. So at a time when the state was looking to downsize hospitals, and at a time when Mayor Rudy Giuliani was looking to privatize the public hospitals, Claire got Mayor Giuliani to commit to $149 million to rebuild Queens Hospital Center as a state-of-the-art facility in the borough of Queens. One of the downsides that Claire also fought on that was the number of beds that the state was giving us through a certificate of need. They would only give us 200, but as Claire would tell the community and all that complained about it was that, listen, you have to start somewhere. And this is the way we're gonna start, and we can always build on it. And they did. I mean, it's over 350 beds now. It has 3 centers of excellence. Peter Magnani, who was deputy to Claire at the time, and who Claire said is the best architect in the entire city of New York, was charged with making sure that the design of that hospital was superb and met the needs of our patients. He also was charged with ensuring that the elevators in the cancer center, which was one of the centers of excellence, only went directly up to the cancer floor. She did not want cancer patients to be disenfranchised or have to stop at every single floor on their way up to get treatment. And
Thank you, Paula.
You're welcome.
And now Marcy Kestner. Marcy was the former Director of Planning and Development.
Hello?
Yes, we're with you.
Okay.
We're with you.
Okay, I'm just trying to get video. I had the honor of working for Claire as her director of planning, but I had met her in 1979 at the Board of Estimate, where I could never understand why she was holding up votes on particular items until I found out subsequently that she was in fact doing this in order to leverage her vote for, say, a park in Queens or a cultural center. Claire balanced growth and change with supports for stable communities. Thus, she created the zoning task force, which I chaired. We prepared the initial land use analyses that convinced the City Planning Commission to rezone and protect over 40 neighborhoods throughout Queens. The Queens West project languished for years until Claire convinced the state to partner with the city and Port Authority. She was the force behind the city's approval of the state's master plan. Peter Mignani, Claire's talented deputy, and I represented her at every Queens West board meeting. Due to the success of Queens West is due to Claire's vision, tenacity, and negotiating skills. In the mid-90s, Claire and Peter saw that a planned upgrade of the connections between two subway lines at Roosevelt Avenue was an opportunity to enhance Jackson Heights with a signature infrastructure improvement. Claire convinced the MTA, New York City Transit, and New York City DOT to acquire an adjacent bus terminal and replace it with a new intermodal station, which is now the second busiest in Queens and which serves 17 million riders annually. In 1995, the Department of Defense announced it was closing part of Bayside's Fort Taunton. The federally mandated community-based advisory committee was co-chaired by Claire and the mayor, but it was Claire, assisted by Irving Poy and me and her staff, who did the work. We worked with the planning firm, the community, fire department, parks. We worked with the Army, and now Fort Taunton is a beautiful city park with city agencies housed there. Everyone knows.
Thank you, Marcy. I'm sorry to cut you off. She thought you were brilliant, but we have to move the program. I don't want us to get cut off. Thank you. And Seth Bornstein,
Yes, hi,
Queens
Nikki.
Economic Development and former Director of Economic Development for Claire.
Thank you. I met Claire 40 years ago in 1980 when it was at the Queens EDC first round. And she was the go-to person to get things done, supported all our efforts, neighborhood economic development, commercial vitalization, and the birth of the Queens Tourism Council. When I came back as director 10 years ago, I opened up the incubator kitchen, and she called me up right away and said, I want to see that place. And she was my first supporter and first official visitor. But when I worked for as director of economic development, there were two projects that were special. The FDA building in Jamaica, where I listened and she got a project done. She, made certain standards. You had to deliver and show up and get it done. A couple of years later, she said to me, "I need a new health center in Rockaway, the Davos Center." Turned to me and said, "Get it done." And using a formula, research, delegation, weekly meetings, and serious nudging of all the principals, we got it done. In 2002, after she was borough president, we dedicated the building. It was a great ceremony. Came up to me afterward and said, "I want to commend you because you really made this happen." And I said, "Wait a minute, I learned from the master," and I really did. She was the master. She got stuff done, and I am so proud to say I was one of the Borough Hall kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Seth. I turn it over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you, Seth. Queens is the largest borough here in the city of New York, and Claire Shulman transformed the landscape of it. So much of what we see and enjoy today in the year 2020 are the results of her extraordinary vision and the decisions and all the leverage that she pulled and made over 18 years ago. She had a vision for the promise of Queens by way of education and cultural institutions, and many who are still executing her vision are here with us live tonight. First, we will hear from the Chancellor of the City University of New York, Felix Matos Rodriguez, also known as Philo, with whom Claire Shulman developed a personal professional connection while he was the head of Queens College. They shared many meals together while exchanging ideas about the future of Queens and where the college should be headed. Good evening, Chancellor. Welcome.
Thank you, Borough President Lee, and thank you to Vicki and Alex for the invite. Our condolences from the CUNY family to Claire's family and loved ones. It's clear that Claire Shulman was a force of nature, and she worked and fought and got things done for the public good in many areas in New York City life. But the one that I know the best and I appreciate the most was her support for public higher education. And public higher education in New York City means CUNY, and in Queens, it means Queens College, York College, LaGuardia Community College, Queensboro Community College, and the CUNY Law School. And Claire was a friend of them all. She graduated from Adelphi Nursing School, but you might not know that she started out at Brooklyn College in 1942 when she was just 16. So CUNY was always close to her heart. Decades later, as a Queensboro president in the days that it meant a seat in the Board of Estimates, she was a champion for CUNY, forcefully and persistently advocating for the funding we needed to advance our mission of opportunity in our diverse borough. Claire had a special passion for healthcare, and she was always looking for ways to link CUNY colleges programs to the hospitals in Queens. One of her biggest successes was getting the FDA to build a new $85 million Northeast Regional Lab and headquarters at York College. She was also a big supporter of the Louis Armstrong House Museum at Queens College, one of New York's and CUNY's treasures. Although I was Queens College president after Claire's tenure as borough president, I benefited from her keen insights, advice, and friendship. She embraced me with open arms when I came to Queens College in 2014. And now it is my turn with my arms to salute her and to pray for her and her loved ones. On behalf of our faculty and students and staff, CUNY joins the entire borough of Queens and New York City in mourning the formidable Claire Shulman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Next, we will hear from the President and CEO of the Queens Public Library. Claire Shulman thought the world of Dennis Walcott and credited him for taking Queens Library to new heights. Claire Shulman believed that libraries are the cornerstone of every neighborhood, and lauded his transformation of the Queens Public Library into the envy of every library system in the nation. Dennis Walcott, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Borough President, and to Vicki, and our condolences from the Queens Public Library to the family. We just loved Claire, and I thought the world of Claire as well. And a special hug and kiss to Alex Rosa. Alex is my heart, and I always think of Alex. So this past Saturday, the Borough President and I were on the plaza of Flushing Library talking about the importance of census. That library would not have been possible without Claire Shulman. Claire fought extremely hard for funding needed to construct the 76,000-foot library, which opened in 1998 and became the busiest library in the country. Over 5,000 to 6,000 people a day, and that's as a result of Claire. Claire also supported for our other branches as well, whether you're looking at Langston Hughes, that was as a result of Claire and Helen, and making sure they worked on behalf of Langston Hughes, where we have over 40,000 volumes of material about the related to Black culture. That same year, Claire fought for the South Jamaica branch as well, and opened it up on Guy R. Brewer Boulevard. Claire was just a fighter for our libraries. In 1999, she opened the new state-of-the-art Cyber Center here at Central Library, which at the time featured 48 computer workstations. Claire was truly a fighter for our libraries. As I close, I have to share a quick personal story as well. November 6, 2011 will be a special time for me and Claire. I was running the New York City Marathon, and I was at the 13th mile, sweating, out of breath. And then all of a sudden I heard this big voice, "Go Dennis!" And of course it was Claire. I had no idea Claire would be there. And among all the noise of the people yelling and cheering, Claire's voice stood out. I love Claire, I respected Claire, and I say thank you to Claire and her family. And we truly at Queens Public Library appreciated everything she did for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Dennis Walcott. Next, we have a short video courtesy of the Queens Cultural Institutions that were near and dear to Claire Shulman.
Ruth.
Thank you. And next we have a quick clip from Mark DeSuero of Socrates Sculpture Park.
My name is Mark DeSuero. I'm a sculptor, and I knew Claire Shulman as the borough president. She was amazing. She was a friend, and she helped build Socrates Sculpture Park, a place where people can walk through and have the city as a background. And she understood that that garbaged land could be transformed. Because of her, we were able to build it. Amazing, a good friend, and terrific in helping us bring art to thousands on thousands of people.
You know, Mark just one thing he said stood out at me. He said she could see in garbaged land could be transformed. She had a unique knack for seeing potential, assets, opportunities, where most would probably just gloss over. One of Claire Shulman's legacies, one of her many legacies, was bringing the film industry back to life here in Queens. There was a time in Queens when the Kaufman Studios, when it was the Paramount Studios in Astoria, as many of you know, sat empty, excessed, falling apart. But Claire Shulman saw the potential and the promise, and she worked with the Screen Actors Guild. She went down to Washington herself. She purchased the building for $1 and transferred the building to an agency that enabled the creation of the studio industry that we know and love and is so vibrant here in Queens today. Once resurrected, the first film screening there was The Wiz, as many of you may remember. And part of the promise included a community benefit, which created what we know and cherish today as the Museum of the Moving Image. And with the trades back in Queens, Silver Cup Studios was born.
She really understood the needs of the people of Queens, both in terms of creating jobs and creating cultural opportunities and educational opportunities for everyone, no matter where you came from. Her personal strength helped out so many to be the best that they could be. And you've heard a lot of that tonight. And she will be missed, but her impacts here in Queens will be felt forever. Thank you very much for letting me join you tonight.
Thank you, Alan Suno. Another Claire Shulman legacy is the Flushing Town Hall, or the restoration of it. At one time, this historic building was left empty, abandoned, a shell. And Claire Shulman worked with the Flushing Council on the Arts, created a board, invested public capital into it, and transformed it into a thriving cultural institution that we know and love today. With us tonight is Ellen Kodadek, Executive Director of the Flushing Town Hall, who today continues to execute Claire's vision of an inclusive, community-based cultural institution. Ellen Kodadek, welcome.
Thank you so very much. Our deepest condolences to all of Claire's loved ones. Flushing Town Hall is among the many, many arts organizations in Queens that would not be here today without Claire's staunch and unwavering belief in the importance of the arts to create and to sustain communities. Both of those things were incredibly important to her, creating and sustaining community and bringing people together. When I first came to Flushing Town Hall in 2008, she told me, "I'm trusting you with something very important to me and to the people of Queens, and I'll be watching." And she did watch over how things were going and was always available for a question or advice or to check in. Fast forward 11 years. In 2019, I asked Claire if we could honor her at Flushing Town Hall's 40th anniversary gala with our first Joanne Jones Award for Devoted Leadership, named after our founder and her dear friend. Over lunch at Mythos, her favorite Greek restaurant, She told me, "I don't usually do that kind of thing anymore, but you've done a great job, kid, and I'm really proud of Flushing Town Hall, and so I accept." I remember how proud I was that Claire was proud of me and the institution that she had entrusted to me, because I knew what very high standards she had. Claire then spent months with her Rolodex and with Vicky and Alex and Michelle and so many others to ensure that the evening was a success. Claire told a great story about how when she was borough president, she told Joanne Jones to go to Flushing Town Hall, then a derelict building on the verge of demolition, and to sit inside and stay there and not leave. And that's how they got the building and saved it from being torn down. She laughed heartily at that memory and made us all laugh along with her boldness. 42 years later, Flushing Town Hall exists because of Claire. She and Joanne pulled that derelict into the future for generations to come. I don't need to tell any of you what a remarkable woman Claire was. We've heard tribute after tribute tonight. She always reminded me of a fierce tigress, supporting, protecting, and fighting for everything she believed in, all overlaid with deep, deep love and an unwavering certainty for what is right. Yehi zichra livrachad tamid. May Claire's memory be for a blessing always. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, I know we've hit the 8 o'clock mark, and I appreciate you being kind and generous with your time. Perhaps we are a little too ambitious thinking that we could fit such a remarkable life into just 2 hours, but we will continue through because we have a number of wonderful folks who are witness to the tremendous legacy of Claire. Another Claire Shulman legacy is the Queen's Botanical Gardens. During her tenure, Claire Shulman reformed the board of directors and poured substantial seed money, pun intended, into it. And it is now, of course, one of our county's most treasured institutions at the forefront of green infrastructure and green technology. But she started that even before it was even popular or even necessary. With us tonight from the Queen's Botanical Gardens is someone who worked very closely with Claire on this vision, Executive Director Susan Lacerte. Welcome.
Thank you, Borough President Lee. And yes, seeds are they're popular right now. We just did an event on seeds. And I will just say that Claire, she doesn't need a last name. In Queens, when you say Claire, you know that it means Claire Shulman. She's a nurse, a mother, a wife, and she wanted to make sure that her kids and all kids got everything they needed. She, upon my arrival as an executive director, she said to me, "Do a good job." And so with those simple, direct, heartfelt words, and with her very able-bodied, knowledgeable chief of staff, Alex Rosa, people like Jane Safer, Jan Schneider, who I know is listening tonight, we embarked on bringing the garden back into flower again. I treasured my frequent meetings with her. She supported our vision of having the garden really lead the way in environmental expression. She got the ball rolling on that, and then Helen embraced it after her. With her support and leadership, we got the first LEED Platinum building in all of New York State, which is very hard to get. We were ahead of the curve, the great green wave that swept the nation and the world with our photovoltaic roof, water gathering roof, and green roof, geothermal heating and cooling. I always marveled how great Claire was at the mic. Every single event, she would deal with big issues, but also with the people. She always had stories to tell about the people. She remembered their names. One thing she said about me is she has twins, and those twins are almost 25. So she was like an aunt to me. She would have wisdom. She would lead you in a direction. She would say, be very supportive of you, but she would also say, well, where did you get those shoes? I really need another comfortable pair. So she was just a real person. I talked to her about 3 weeks before she died, not knowing, of course, that would be my last conversation with her. And she said that you have made an institution. You're the best thing that ever happened to that place. And I just say, I loved Claire. So many of us loved Claire. And so many of us are so thankful that we got to know her for so long. So thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Susan Lacerte. Another legacy is the Queen's Theater in the Park. You know, at one time, it of course, stood as an abandoned relic of the World's Fair. So, of course, Claire Shulman worked with Kitty Carlisle Hart, invested the seed money, and worked with the board to create the theater we know and cherish today. With us tonight is with Claire on it during his time as the executive director of the Queen's Theater, someone who cultivated new and dynamic productions and transformed it into the cultural magnet that it is today. Jeff Rosenstock, welcome.
Thank you. So Claire Shulman, what a force. Who else could keep our borough hitting the highest notes under her masterful conducting of leaders and doers who said, hey, we want to be in your orchestra. I came to Queens in 1989 to reopen an abandoned World's Fair building into Queens Theater in the Park. Claire's the one who fought the city to issue the RFP. She knew the funds for the theater were being diverted to another borough, and she wouldn't have any of that. As many heard me say over curtain speeches over the years, no Claire Shulman, no Queens Theater in the Park. And anytime I saw her, she'd always ask, how's my playhouse doing? And it wasn't a rhetorical question. She always reminded me, I invested taxpayer dollars into that theater, so you be sure to give them the return on their investment. And in 2002, when she completed her term as borough president, we honored her by naming our main auditorium the Claire Shulman Playhouse, because this is the house that Claire Shulman built. And in 1994, I had a crazy idea of getting legislators to perform in a show to raise funds for the theater. Claire was the first, and when she said yes, all the rest of the politicians also agreed to take center stage in spoofs of TV, movies, and Broadway shows. Claire, always playing opposite Peter Vallone Sr., portrayed Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca, Liza Doolittle in My Fair Lady, and Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. And in 2013, she played the role of Wonder Woman, which was typecasting on my part, because Wonder Woman is who Claire was each and every day for all of us in Queens. I love you, Claire.
Thank you, Jeff Rosenstock. Another Claire Shulman legacy, the New York Hall of Science in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park. At one time, yes, you guessed it, it was an empty, dilapidated building, water dripping from the ceilings when she visited because she was very hands-on and went to the site. But Claire Shulman saw the promise, and she came from a family of medicine, as you've heard, and was immersed in the medical field. She was a nurse by trade, as you've heard, and had high regard for the sciences and knew it was the key to Queens' future. And so Claire Shulman developed it with Alan Friedman, the first executive director. And when Margaret Honey took it over, they became very, very close personal friends, and it expanded into the institution it is today. Margaret Honey, welcome.
Thank you so much, Borough President Lee, Vicki, and the Shulman family. It really is an honor to be asked to join in this memorial service for Claire. Like all of you, I adored Claire Shulman, and from the moment we met, she felt intimate, familiar, someone I had always known. Claire had, as we've heard throughout the evening, a non-negotiable commitment to using government as a force for good. And that was a value that was very much etched in my own upbringing. Government was a tool to be used to create a better world, and Claire wanted only the best for Queens, the best theater, the best art museum, the best botanical garden, and of course, a world-class science center. Claire worked hand in glove with NYSCI's founding director, Dr. Alan Friedman, to transform the Hall of Science into the world-class institution it is today. She was proud that she created a science center for the children of Queens that could rival any other venue in the world. Claire's last visit, of course, I didn't know it was going to be her last visit, was on December 4th, 2019. She came to see a traveling show that we were hosting called Art of the Brick. Giant Lego sculptures, a really, really wonderful show. And she was delighted. Her eyes sparkled, her hands slapped her knees. And I remember her exclaiming, "Oh, how I wish I were 10 all over again." And Claire being Claire, she followed up that same day with an email back to me, and I'm going to quote from it. Dear Margaret, what a wonderful day it has been. The museum, of course, is way beyond my expectations, and you are a super angel person. I think she had a lot of angel people in her life. She goes on, it is so inspiring and breathtaking, and it's in Queens. I am very parochial. Thanks for lunch. Excuse my typing. I will never be a secretary, but I am very good at sewers. See you soon, Claire. I feel incredibly fortunate to have been the beneficiary of Claire's foresight and wisdom, and I'll be forever grateful for her wonderful stream of typo-laden notes of encouragement and support. And I know that all of us together will continue to work on realizing her vision for her beloved Queens. So thank you.
Thank you, Margaret Honey. Another Claire Shulman legacy, the Queens Public Television, one of our partners for this celebration and tribute tonight. QPTV, the very first public access channel in Queens, made possible by Stuart Wagner and Claire Shulman's aggressive negotiations for the cable franchise agreement. The following is a message from QPTV's Dan Leone.
Just want to say, without Claire Shulman, there would not be community media. Claire was instrumental in negotiations with the cable operators and the municipality. During the early 1980s, her efforts and hard work allowed the residents of Queens an opportunity to have their voices heard. Those voices continue to be heard today. I'm honored to have worked with Claire.
Next, we have a short clip, and we get to hear Claire Shulman's voice as she speaks about public access.
Many years ago, when public access and cable television was really the starter of all these companies came in and they wanted to do cable television in the borough of Queens, and everybody had different ideas about how to do it, and it was Cablevision and it was Time Warner, but part of the cable television coming to the borough, to the city of New York, as a matter of fact, was public access. Public access was part of the contract. And all the companies that finally got the contract for cable television were required to do a public access contract. And it was wonderful because it gave our people the opportunity to express some of the things that they think are very important for the future of the borough. It gave people that were just beginning to express their heritage in terms of cultural events. As a matter of fact, because this borough is so diverse in population, public access gives us the opportunity to tell the world what we have here and allows them to express what they have to share with other cultures. And it shows the world that we get along with each other and do very well with each other. And there is very little friction among the wonderful people that come here from all over the world. And they speak, I don't know, maybe 170 different languages and dialects. And so we are very proud of Queens. We are very proud of the city of New York. And we are always welcoming people that want to come here to live and work. And I know there's lots of conversations about people coming here, but the reason the city of New York is the greatest city in the world is because the people that come here. They create the fabric of what New York City is and what the future of the city is. And we are grateful for everyone. And let me tell you that the dream is still alive because people come here and become very successful. And I can give you chapter and verse about how that works. And this is a great country, and the city of New York is the greatest of them all. Really, it is the essence of our democracy.
Speakers, and I'll hand the mic back over to Vicki Schneps.
admired, Catherine Weil. Are you there with us? She is the head of the Partnership of New York City, one of the most important organizations that we have in our city, making change.
Thank
Catherine?
you, Vicki.
Okay, you're there. Great.
I am here, and thank you, Sharon. I'm delighted to be here. I express sympathy to Claire's family, and thanks to you both for putting on this this recognition. I think my job is to say that Claire was not just a treasure for Queens, she was a treasure for all of New York City. When she came to power, there was a huge challenge in New York City, a crisis of confidence in the leadership of the city. And Claire, more than anyone else, reassured New Yorkers that our government had a future that was authentic, that was real, that was dedicated to the people of New York, not self-serving. We face another crisis today, and I think tonight's service is important because it reminds us of the kind of leadership that Claire provided and that we need today in New York City. It has to be authentic as she was. It has to care more about people and the future of the city than personal political power or ideology. And so thank you for doing this because it reminds all of us, and I hope for succeeding generations, the younger generations, it inspires them to understand what's important and what Claire stood for and what we need to do to fight for our city today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And now we move to Jacqueline McCary, who runs the New York Presbyterian Queens, another power woman.
Thank you, Vicki. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thanks. It's really my honor to be here. As was mentioned, Claire was a nurse, and she reminded me she was a nurse almost every time I saw her. She was an advocate for health care for Queens. In 1996, she was instrumental in getting approval from New York State for a cardiothoracic surgery program, the only one in Queens. She joined the board of directors of New York Presbyterian Queens. It was not called it back then. She joined the board in 2002 and remained active on our board up until the very last board meeting. She attended every meeting, even if we had to go pick her up, and she participated vigorously. She really wanted the residents of Queens to remain in Queens for healthcare, and she challenged us to bring every service possible to our hospital so we can keep care in Queens. And it was my personal goal to honor her and do that. On a personal note, when I joined the hospital 4 years ago, I met Claire very shortly thereafter, and we had an immediate connection. She was so excited that the hospital finally had a woman president. From there, she made it her personal mission to introduce me to as many people as she can, mostly powerful women. She, in fact, introduced me to Vicki, to Susan Lacerte. She suggested that I join Margaret Honey on the board of NYSI, and I'm really eternally grateful. She really took me under her wing. We had board calls every single week during the pandemic, and she listened with great fervor about what we were doing during the crisis. And she was very interested in how the staff was doing and how I was doing personally. She always told me how proud she was of me and of everybody who worked at the hospital to really advance care in Queens. It was really my honor and privilege, as Vicki knows, to help her during her final visit to our hospital. We made the stay as best we could for her, and the only worry she had was for her dog. So it was really a privilege knowing her. I'm happy that I was able to help her in her final visit, and I will make it my goal to make her proud of my hospital. And I wanted to express the sympathies from our board and all of our 5,000 employees. So thank you for inviting me to join this evening.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for the tender, loving care you gave her just a week, before she died. So it was really a very wonderful wonderful, caring time for her that you made it so special. And now we have Joe Ficalora, the CEO of New York Community Bank, known in Queens as Queens County Savings Bank, and a very loving person for Claire. Joe, you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
And
great.
certainly it's been a pleasure to hear the many wonderful things said about Claire this evening. I would like to add that I currently serve on 2 boards of directors with Claire. So Claire is not done. Claire has been working right up until today. She is a very active participant in what is important to Queens whenever she can be. And she's been a significant contributor to the 2 boards that I have the pleasure of serving on with Claire Shulman. I would suggest that we've all heard how wonderful she has been to the borough. And in particular, I know that she was instrumental in the redevelopment of the Corona Plaza. We funded it because she made it possible. And it has become a much better place for the people of Corona to actually commute to and from work via the number 7 line. But in any event, I definitely believe that we've today captured some of what makes Claire so very, very unique and special. All these decades of contribution to the well-being of her peers, to the well-being of the people of Queens. Very important for us all. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Joe. That Corona Park project was so close to her heart, and she loved that relationship that you made. Vinny Rizzo, who was a dear, dear friend of Claire's and involved in a lot of the affordable housing and is head of the Briarwood organization, was going to speak, but he couldn't. But I just wanted to mention how much the love and how he watched over her, and she looked forward to their Sunday night movies and dinners out. And I am now happy to have Stephen and Thomas Chen from Crystal Windows talk with us.
Good evening. Thank you, Vicki, for arranging this tribute, and thank you for the family and friends of Claire's for sharing such wonderful stories. I am Steve Chen of Crystal Windows, and on behalf of myself and my father, Thomas Chen, it is an honor to participate in this tribute in memory of Claire Shulman. Claire was truly an extraordinary person. She was someone who tirelessly pursued what was best for the people and businesses of Queens. Claire was a mentor, an advisor, a motivator, Crystal's biggest fan, and a dear friend who over the past 30 years was instrumental in the success of Crystal Windows. My father often speaks of the time about 20 years ago when Claire was borough president and how she kept the New York City EDC on task as we acquired our manufacturing property in the College Point Corporate Park, which was pretty desolate back then. As the new building was ready to be opened in September of 2001, Claire was there again, cutting through the approval delays with the building department as many city operations grounded to a halt following the 9/11 attacks. Today, our Queens factory and headquarters employs over 370 employees and is the flagship of our national network of production facilities, which includes almost 700 employees. Thomas shared with Claire a love of the arts. We are very glad that last October, she was able to visit the Crystal Park Outdoor Art and Nature Preserve in Dutchess County. And I believe, Vicki, you were there too.
Yes.
To see the future site of a statue commission in her honor, which I'm going to try to give a sneak preview.
Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? She
Already.
loved the statue design.
Yes, yes, yes. And
She gave it a Tech Plus.
are you able to see this here?
I don't think so.
No, well then, it is going to, there is a
We'll get it up online, Stephen. Send it to me. Send me a copy because at qns.com, people can send their memories if they couldn't say enough tonight. And you can send that because that's meant so much to her to go to the park and to see the site that would hold her statue.
Thank you. And I'm adding to the tribute from her grandparents to me. I'm part of the younger generation that was very fortunate to have gone to know Claire. I know everyone's been saying Claire's been Queens of Queens, but to me, I felt that she was the grandparent to all of Queens. She was at my wedding. Months later, when we met on occasion, she would ask me, almost demanded, on status of when me and my wife were having children. And when we did, she constantly always wants to see pictures of our children. We always miss Claire, and we will never forget her. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to close out this piece of the program, I just want you to know that this was Claire's last project and something she adored and something she put every ounce of her body, mind, and spirit into. And John Racanelli, who is the chairman of this project, the Willits Point Corona Local Development Corporation. John.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you all for putting this together, contributing tonight, and of course, my condolences to Claire's family. And she had a very large extended family as well. I've had the privilege of working with Claire for several years as chairman of the LDC, which Claire founded in 2007 at the very young age of 80, incredibly. As president and driving force of the LDC, Claire conceived and initiated projects that are transforming Flushing and the Flushing Creek waterfront. At Claire's graceful but relentless urging, the Long Island Railroad and the MTA completed badly needed improvements to the Main Street Long Island Railroad station. She conceived and led the effort to develop a vacant municipal lot into 232 units of affordable housing. The LDC successfully bid for and was awarded a Brownfield Opportunity Area Program grant from the New York Department of State, which led to a partnership with the city Department of Planning, which is actually the subcontractor of the LDC for this project, and the creation of the special Flushing Waterfront District, which will soon be realized in the redevelopment of 40 acres between College Point Boulevard and Flushing Creek. It's called Flushing West. I think you've all seen certain renderings of this exciting project. Claire's concern for seniors and the lack of accessible healthcare coverage led to the LDC's creation of the Healthy Flushing Community Action Plan, which provided health initiatives, including outdoor Tai Chi classes for seniors. Claire remained active till the end and was always looking for projects for the betterment of her beloved Queens. And to the end, she displayed all the qualities for which Claire was so highly loved and respected, and which so many speakers tonight have described. Claire truly was a marvel and will be missed by all who had the privilege of knowing and working with her. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for sharing that. She is a role model for our city and for every political leader that there is today. If only they will listen and learn from her being a leader in our community. Thank you, John. And now I wanted to see Alex Rosa. Spotlight on Alex.
Tonight, we joined together to honor a woman who transcends the word greatness. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart, Borough President Sharon Lee and Vicki Schneps and the incredible team at QPTV for putting this together and helping us celebrate her life. There were so many people who reached out with loving tributes to Claire because she touched so many lives and she has her imprint of progress in every corner of the borough. As I mourn her passing, I could still hear her voice ringing in my ears saying, "Let's go, Cookie, there's work to be done." In our tumultuous world, there's clearly so much more to be done. So let that be the way that we honor Claire, by carrying on her imperative to always move forward and to always improve the lives of the people around us. Rest easy, Ma.
We are putting thank you so much, Alex. And there's a gallery view. Sharon?
Hi, Vicki. And before we close, I just want to say a quick thing, and I'll give you the last word. But for everybody in this room, thank you so much for joining us for this, again, very special tribute. It was my deep honor to co-host this with Vicki Schneps, with the guidance of Alex Rosa, QPTV, and everybody, as we mentioned at the beginning. And I will just say that for everybody in the room, as well as everybody who's watching on QPTV and online, if I should say when you miss Claire, just look around. Anywhere in Queens, her legacy is truly ubiquitous. and to her families, to Claire's families. Thank you so much for sharing her with Queens and the world.
Thank you. And thank Elizabeth Aloni for putting this together with this webinar that has seamlessly run for an hour and 2 hours and a half, but it's never enough time because Claire seems to have, we can't get enough of her. And we thought she would live forever, but she is forever in our hearts, and I know in mine. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Good night.
Thank you.